Welcome back to One Quiet Motivation. In the last episode, we talked about the power of growing in silence, about building strength privately before seeking visibility publicly. But today, I want to go deeper, because sometimes the issue is not just personal growth. Sometimes the issue is foundation. It is very easy to lose track of where the cracks started. What once felt unstable slowly becomes normal. What once concerned communities becomes accepted culture. And in many ways, this generation has made choices, not always intentionally, that have pushed God to the margins of everyday life. Not removed completely, just no longer central. Today we're going to talk about family, fatherhood, responsibility, cycles that repeat themselves, not to judge, not to condemn, but to ask, is there another way we could live? Let's reflect together. In the last post, we spoke about growing in silence, about building strength privately before seeking visibility publicly. But what happens when we stop building foundations altogether? It is very easy to lose track of where the cracks started from. Over time, what once shocked us becomes normal. What once concerned communities becomes just how things are. And slowly, we forget what solid foundations even look like. If you are a student of value, you can usually tell when something is right and when something is drifting. Before I go further, let me say this clearly. This is not written to judge. It is written to point to another option, another way we could live together, maybe based on how it used to be, or how it should be, especially in the area of parenting and family. What I've noticed, I have seen something. Too many single mothers. And before anyone misunderstands, this is not criticism of women carrying responsibility. Many are doing extraordinary work under immense pressure. But I cannot help asking, where did the fathers go? And in many cases, the answer is uncomfortable. I have seen men around, but not fathers. Presence is not the same as leadership. Biology is not the same as responsibility. You may recognize this in your own environment. The cycle. We don't talk about a teenage girl moves in with a teenage boy. There is no long-term plan, no stable foundation, no guidance rooted in wisdom. A child is born. Within a short time, the relationship breaks down. Now a young woman, perhaps barely in her 20s, is left to raise a child alone. If the child is a boy, he grows up without seeing what fatherhood looks like in action. He never watches a man lead him into maturity. He never experiences disciplined love from a present father. If the child is a girl, she may grow up believing this is normal, that raising a child alone is simply how life unfolds. And so the value of family is not rejected, it is never experienced. Then these children grow up and repeat what they know, and the cycle continues. When God leaves the conversation, part of the deeper issue is this. We have slowly removed God from our collective consciousness, not aggressively, not always intentionally, but gradually. When God is no longer central, marriage becomes optional before intimacy, responsibility becomes negotiable, commitment becomes temporary, pleasure becomes primary. Without a higher standard, culture becomes the guide, and culture shifts constantly. In some environments, marriage is still a prerequisite to sex and family. In some cultures, maturity and age are prerequisites to living together. But in many spaces today, feeling is the only requirement. When we stop talking about what used to anchor families, or what should anchor them, the next generation grows up without a reference point. They inherit patterns without understanding their consequences. This is not about condemnation. This is about awareness. It is about asking difficult questions without hatred. It is about recognizing that quiet growth is not only personal, it is generational. If we want stronger societies, we must build stronger families. If we want stronger families, we must rebuild responsibility. If we want responsibility to return, we must restore a consciousness that answers to something higher than convenience. A quiet reflection. Where did the cracks begin in your environment? What patterns are being repeated simply because they were never challenged? Have we normalized instability because it is common? What would change if God was not an afterthought but a foundation? What kind of father, mother, leader, or example are you becoming even now? And finally, if you feel the need for change, if you feel something must be rebuilt, if you want to lend your voice towards something stronger, say it. I need a voice. Comment, share, reflect, because awareness is the beginning of revival. Grow in silence, look up for strength, rise with purpose. If this conversation stirred something in you, sit with it. This space is not about noise. It's about awareness. It's about returning to foundations. It's about building something steady again. One Quiet Motivation is becoming more than a platform. It's becoming a home for people who want depth over display, responsibility over excuses, and faith over cultural drift. If you feel that, I invite you to stay connected. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss future reflections. Subscribe to the One Quiet Motivation Substack for deeper written thoughts that go beyond what we can say in an episode. And join us on YouTube, where we continue these conversations through spoken encouragement and visual reflection. Follow us across our social media platforms as we gradually build this presence, steadily, intentionally, quietly. Thank you for listening, thank you for reflecting, and thank you for trusting the voice we are becoming. Grow in silence, look up for strength, rise with purpose. I'll see you in the next episode.